The throne room of Valanthos had never known such silence. Aelith felt it fall like a shroud the moment the boy's fingers closed around hers. 500 wolves packed into the ancient hall, nobles and warriors and servants alike, and not one of them drew breath. The child stood barely as high as her hip. Dark hair fell across his forehead in waves she knew intimately, though she had never been allowed to brush them from his face. His eyes, wide and wondering, were the deep amber of autumn honey, his father's eyes. "You," the boy whispered, and the word trembled with something that should not exist in a child so young. Recognition. Bone deep and absolute. "You smell like the dreams." Aelith's knees buckled. She sank to the cold marble before him, chains rattling against the stone floor. The guards who had dragged her into this hall stepped back as if burned, uncertain how to handle a prisoner who knelt not in submission to the king, but in reverence to his heir. She reached up with shackled hands and cupped the boy's face. "Emrys," she breathed. The name she had given him in the darkness of a forest cave, moments after he had taken his first breath. The name she had whispered into his soft hair for 3 precious months before they tore him from her arms. "My Emrys." The hall erupted. Voices crashed against the vaulted ceiling. Nobles shouted accusations. Warriors reached for their blades. And from the raised dais at the far end of the room, a woman in a crown of black diamonds screamed a single word: "Lies!" But Aelith did not hear her, did not see the chaos exploding around them. She saw only her son, alive and whole, and looking at her with tears streaming down his cheeks. "I dreamed of you," Emrys said, his small hands clutching her wrists. "Every night, you sang to me. You called me little wolf." His voice cracked. "Why did you leave me? Why did you never come?" The question tore open a wound that had never healed through 4 years of searching, of starving, of surviving on nothing but the desperate hope of this moment. "I never left you," she choked out. "They took you from me. They stole you while I slept, and told me you were dead." "Enough!" The roar cut through the chaos like a blade. Aelith looked up, and the Alpha King of Valanthos looked back. Varric had risen from his throne. His massive frame blocked the light from the windows behind him, casting his face in shadow. But she could see his eyes, those amber eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, blazing with an emotion she could not name. He descended the dais steps slowly, deliberately. Each footfall echoed through the hall like a death knell. The crowd parted before him like water. "This woman," Varric said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "is a trespasser, a criminal who evaded the border guard and infiltrated the palace." He stopped 10 feet from where she knelt. "She will be taken to the dungeons to await trial." "Varric." His name fell from her lips before she could stop it. "Varric, please." "The prisoner will not address the king." A guard's hand closed around her arm, yanking her backward. Emrys cried out as their contact broke, reaching for her with desperate hands. "Mama!" The word froze everyone in place. Varric's expression cracked. For one instant, one single heartbeat, Aelith saw something beneath the cold mask. Something raw and wounded and utterly lost. Then it was gone. "Take her," he commanded, "now." As the guards hauled her toward the doors, Aelith twisted to keep her eyes on her son. Emrys was fighting against the woman in the black diamond crown, thrashing and screaming as Ravenna Dravos held him with white-knuckled hands. "I will come back for you," Aelith screamed. "Emrys, I swear it. I will never stop fighting." The doors slammed shut between them. And in the darkness of the corridor, dragged toward the bowels of the palace, Aelith let the memories she had buried for 5 years finally surface. 5 years earlier, the great hall had been decorated for celebration. Thousands of candles blazed from the chandeliers. Garlands of winter roses hung from every pillar. The nobility of Valanthos had gathered in their finest silks and furs to witness the most anticipated event in a generation, the Alpha King's claiming ceremony. Aelith had not been invited. She pressed herself into the shadows of the servants' gallery, her heart hammering so violently she feared the wolves below might hear it. Her position in the kitchens had given her no right to be here, no place among the glittering crowd, but she had needed to see, needed to know if every whispered promise had been a lie. Varric stood on the dais in ceremonial black and silver, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He looked every inch the king he had been born to become. He did not look like the man who had pressed her against an ancient oak 3 nights ago and sworn she was his mate. "The candidates will approach," the High Elder announced. Aelith watched 5 women in flowing white ascend the dais steps. Daughters of the great houses, each one more beautiful than the last. And at their center, her silver hair cascading like a frozen waterfall, walked Ravenna Dravos. The woman Varric's council had chosen for him, the woman Aelith had been promised, did not matter. She touched the mark on her hip through the fabric of her dress. The claiming bite Varric had given her 2 months ago, hidden from all eyes, burned with quiet heat. A promise written in flesh, a bond that could not be broken. "The council's demands mean nothing," he had told her. "You are my true mate. When the ceremony comes, I will refuse them all. I will claim you before the entire kingdom." She had believed him. The High Elder's voice droned through the ancient words. Aelith's pulse roared in her ears, counting the seconds until Varric would turn, until he would find her in the shadows, until he would speak her name and damn the consequences. "Varric, Alpha King of Volanthos, blood of the first wolves," the elder intoned. "You have heard the counsel of your advisors. Speak now your choice." The silence stretched like a blade against skin. Aelith stopped breathing. Varric stepped forward. His movement was strange, mechanical. His gait lacked the fluid grace she had traced with her fingers in moonlit clearings, and his eyes, those amber eyes that had burned with passion when he looked at her, were flat, empty, dead. "I choose," his voice echoed hollowly, "Ravenna of House Dravos." The hall exploded with cheers, and something inside Aelith shattered like glass beneath a hammer. The mark on her hip erupted with pain so intense her vision went white. She doubled over, bile rising in her throat, her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle the scream tearing through her. Through tear-blurred eyes, she watched Varric take Ravenna's hand, watched him raise it to his lips, watched the woman smile with triumph, while the man Aelith loved showed nothing at all. He did not search for her in the crowd. He did not hesitate. He did not remember she existed. Aelith ran. She ran through servant corridors that blurred into nothing. She ran past startled maids and confused guards. She ran until she reached her tiny chamber and collapsed against the door, sobs ripping from her chest with such force she thought her ribs might crack. Her hand found her belly. The secret she had discovered 3 days ago. The reason she had been so certain he would choose her. His child, growing inside her while he pledged himself to another. She had to leave, had to disappear before Ravenna discovered her existence and removed the inconvenient obstacle permanently. The Dravos family was not known for mercy. Aelith packed with shaking hands. A few dresses, her mother's ring, the dried herbs she would need for the sickness that plagued her mornings. She paused at the window, looking out at the celebration fires being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that hall, Varric was accepting congratulations for his wise choice. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered to the frosted glass. "May your choice bring you the happiness I could not." She slipped through the servants' gate and disappeared into the winter night. She did not see the figure in the tower window. She did not see the amber eyes that suddenly blazed with desperate awareness, and she did not hear the howl that shattered the celebration moments later, a sound of such anguish that wolves across the kingdom dropped to their knees in shared grief. By the time Varric reached her empty chamber, Aelith was already gone, and the nightmare was only beginning. 4 years? 3 months? 17 days. That was how long Aelith had searched for her son. The village of Fernhollow knew nothing of her true name, To them, she was simply Bryn, the quiet healer who had arrived during the bitter winter 5 years past, heavy with child and hollow with grief. They had given her the abandoned cottage at the forest's edge. She had given them remedies for their ailments and asked no questions in return. A fair trade for a woman with secrets to bury. The pregnancy had been difficult. Alone in that tiny cottage, with nothing but her grandmother's herbal knowledge and sheer stubborn will, Aelith had fought for every breath. The birth had nearly killed her. 3 days of labor that left her bleeding on the floor, certain she would die before seeing her child's face. But Emrys had been strong. He had entered the world screaming, his tiny fists already swinging against the unfairness of existence. Aelith had laughed through her tears and pressed him to her chest, feeling his heartbeat sink with hers. "Little wolf," she had whispered, "my brave little wolf." For 3 months they had been everything to each other. She had memorized every detail of him during those precious weeks, the way his amber eyes crinkled when he smiled, the birthmark behind his left ear shaped like a crescent moon, the sound of his laughter when she tickled his belly, bright and pure and untouched by the cruelty of the world that awaited him. Then the men came. They wore no colors, carried no banners. But the precision of their attack, the way they had known exactly where to find her, told Aelith everything she needed to know. How Stravos had not forgotten about her. She had fought. Gods, she had fought with every fiber of her being, had clawed and bitten and screamed until her throat bled. But she was one Omega, still weakened from childbirth, against 6 trained wolves. They had taken Emrys from her arms and left her for dead in the snow. When she woke 2 days later, feverish and frostbitten, her milk still leaking for a child who was gone, something inside her had turned to iron. She had not stopped searching since. The rumors reached Fern Hollow on a merchant's wagon, 4 years and 2 months after the night her world ended. Aelith was grinding willow bark in her mortar when Hannah, the blacksmith's wife, burst through her door without knocking. "Bryn, Bryn, you must hear this." Aelith set down her pestle, keeping her expression carefully neutral. "What news?" "The capital." Hannah's eyes were bright with the excitement of gossip. "The Alpha King's son has taken ill. Some wasting sickness the palace healers cannot cure." The mortar slipped from Aelith's fingers. "The prince," she heard herself say. "How old is he?" 4 years, near enough. Born just months after the king's marriage. Though there were whispers. Hannah leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They say the queen birthed no babe at all. That the child was brought to the palace in secret. That he is not truly." "Thank you, Hannah." Aelith's voice came from very far away. "I need to close the shop." She did not remember pushing the woman out. Did not remember barring the door and sinking to the floor with her hand pressed against her racing heart. 4 years old. Born months after the king's marriage, brought to the palace in secret. Her son, her Emrys. He was alive, and he was dying. The journey to Valanthos took 3 weeks. Aelith traveled by night, avoiding the main roads, trading her healing skills for food and shelter. By the time she reached the capital, the first snows of winter had begun to fall. The city had changed in 5 years. New buildings rose where old ones had stood, and everywhere, on every banner and every flag, flew the joined crests of Valanthos and House Stravos. Ravenna had made her mark on the kingdom. Aelith pulled her hood lower and slipped through the crowds. She needed information. She needed a way into the palace. "The prince is dying." She stopped. 2 women stood nearby, their heads bent together in conversation. "The healers say it is moonblight fever. There is no cure." "Poor thing. And him so young. They say the queen is beside herself with grief." "The queen?" The second woman's voice dripped with disdain. "She has barely visited the child's sickbed." Moonblight fever. She knew the name. A rare illness that struck only wolfkind, usually fatal within weeks of onset. The palace healers would know the standard treatments: bloodletting, silver tonics, prayer to the old gods. None of them worked. But there was another way. A forbidden remedy passed down through her grandmother's line, a cure that required the blood of a parent, freely given, combined with moon petals gathered at midnight. A cure that only worked if the parent's bond to the child was true. Ravenna's blood would never heal Emrys, because Ravenna was not his mother. But Aelith's might. "Hold on, little wolf," she whispered. "Mama is coming." The servant's entrance was exactly where she remembered. Aelith's hands trembled as she pushed open the hidden door behind the kitchen gardens. 5 years ago, she had fled through this same passage with tears streaming down her face. Now she returned, older, harder, with nothing left to lose. The corridors were quiet at this hour. She moved through the shadows like a ghost, following the path her body remembered even when her mind tried to forget. She was so focused on her destination that she did not notice the figure stepping from the darkness until a hand closed around her arm. Well. The voice sent ice through her veins. Lord Kirin Dravo smiled at her, his silver eyes gleaming in the torchlight. He had aged in 5 years, his hair now streaked with white, but his grip was still iron. "The king's little whore," he purred. "We had wondered when you might crawl back." Guards materialized from every shadow. They forced her to her knees before the man who had destroyed her life. "4 years we have searched for you," Kirin said pleasantly, "and now you deliver yourself to our doorstep like a gift." "My son," Aelith gasped. "Please, he is dying. I can save him." Kirin laughed. "Your son? The prince is Ravenna's child. Any claim otherwise is treason. He will die without me. Then he will die. Ravenna can produce another." He leaned close. "But you, inconvenient creature, will not be given that chance." He nodded to the guards. "Take her to the dungeon. We will deal with her after the prince's funeral." They dragged her away, and Aelith, screaming her son's name into the uncaring darkness, felt the last fragments of hope crumbling to ash. The dungeon beneath the palace of Volanthos was older than the kingdom itself. Aelith had been thrown into a cell carved from black stone, its walls slick with moisture that never dried. A single torch flickered in the corridor beyond, casting shadows that seemed to move with malicious intent. She had not stopped shaking. Emrys, her little wolf, lying in a sickbed somewhere above her, the fever consuming him inch by inch while she rotted in darkness. "You should not have come back." The voice emerged from the shadows at the far end of her cell. Aelith scrambled backward, her chains clanking against the stone. She had thought herself alone. A figure stepped into the dim light. He was older than she remembered. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and lines had carved themselves around his eyes. But she would have known Coran, first beta of Volanthos, in any form. "You," she breathed. Coran crouched before the bars, his amber eyes searching her face. 4 years. "We thought you were dead." The king thought. He stopped, jaw tightening. "The king chose another," Aelith said bitterly. "The king threw me aside like refuse. What the king thinks means nothing to me." Something flickered in Corin's expression. Pain. Or perhaps pity. "You do not know," he said quietly. "You ran before anyone could tell you." "Tell me what?" Corin glanced over his shoulder, checking for listeners. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The night of the ceremony, someone poisoned the king's wine. A compound derived from Black Moon's bane. It severed his connection to his wolf, to his instincts, to his bond." The words struck Aelith like physical blows. He remembered nothing of choosing Ravenna, nothing of the ceremony at all. The first thing he did when he woke was run to your chamber. Corin's voice cracked. "You were already gone, and something inside him broke." Aelith's hand moved instinctively to the mark on her hip, the scar that had never faded, that had burned with constant heat for 5 years, no matter how far she ran. "The bond," she whispered. It never dissolved. True mate bonds cannot be severed by poison. They can only be suppressed. The moment the drug left his system, the bond roared back to life. But you were gone, and he could not find you. And every day that passed without you. Corin did not finish. He did not need to. He searched for you, the beta continued. For years he tore the kingdom apart looking, sent wolves to every corner of the realm, but you had vanished completely. 5 years. 5 years of exile and grief and searching for her stolen child. 5 years of believing herself abandoned, when all along he had been searching for her just as desperately. Emrys, she gasped. Coran, the prince. He is my son, mine and Varric's. I gave birth to him in exile, and the Dravos family stole him from me. Ravenna is not his mother. Corin went very still. I can prove it. He has a birthmark behind his left ear, shaped like a crescent moon. I traced it every night for 3 months before they took him. Aelith pulled aside her hair to reveal the small crescent behind her own left ear. It is a family trait. The beta's face had drained of color. The birthmark. I have seen it. When the prince was an infant, I asked Ravenna about it. The king needs to know this. It is not that simple. The Dravos family controls half the council. Their soldiers fill the palace guard. If I go to the king openly, Kieran will know within the hour, and you will be dead before Varric can reach you. Before Corin could say more, footsteps echoed in the corridor. The beta pressed something through the bars, a small vial filled with dark liquid. Drink this when they come for you, he whispered urgently. It will slow your heart, make you appear dead. I will claim your body and— Corin! The shout came from somewhere above, more footsteps moving fast. Corin cursed and backed away from the bars. Whatever happens, do not reveal yourself to anyone but the king. Trust no one else. The Dravos family has eyes everywhere. But he was already gone, melting into the shadows as if he had never been there at all. Aelith clutched the vial in her trembling hands. The footsteps were growing louder. She had seconds to decide. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. Keys jangled. The lock clicked open. And Lord Kieran Dravos smiled at her through the bars. Good news, my dear. The execution has been moved up. It seems the queen is eager to tie up loose ends before the prince's condition worsens. Behind him, 4 guards entered the cell with chains. Aelith looked at the vial in her palm, looked at the men approaching her with death in their eyes, and made her choice. She lifted the vial to her lips and drank. Death, Aelith discovered, tasted like bitter almonds and regret. The potion burned down her throat and spread through her veins like liquid ice. Her heartbeat, already racing with terror, began to slow. Each pulse came further apart than the last, the rhythm of her life winding down like a music box at the end of its song. She collapsed before Kieran could reach her. The stone floor was cold against her cheek. Distantly, she heard shouting. Hands grabbed her shoulders, shook her roughly. Someone pressed fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse that grew fainter with every passing second. She's dying. My lord, she's poisoned herself. Kieran's curse was the last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her whole. Aelith woke to the smell of earth and roses. She gasped, lungs burning as they remembered how to breathe. Her body convulsed, rejecting the false death that had held her in its grip. Easy, easy now. Hands steadied her. Coran's face swam into focus above her. Where am I? The catacombs beneath the palace. Kieran believed you dead. He ordered your body thrown into the pauper's pit outside the city walls. I intercepted the cart. How long? 6 hours. The potion worked exactly as intended. Corin's jaw tightened. But the prince has worsened. The healers say he will not survive the night. No, I need to reach him. I can save him. That is why I am taking you to the king. You said it was too dangerous. The Dravos family has already won if Emrys dies. The beta's voice was raw. The king would sooner burn this kingdom to ash than let that happen. He loves that boy, Aelith. Whatever else the Dravos family has corrupted, They could not touch that. Take me to him, she said. They emerged behind a tapestry in the king's private chambers. Varric stood at the window, his back to them. He had not changed from the clothes he had worn in the throne room. His shoulders, once so proud and straight, curved inward as if bearing an invisible weight. One hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed, reaching towards something he could not touch. I said I wished to be alone, Corin. His voice was hollow, emptied of the commanding power she had heard in the great hall. This was a man at the end of his endurance. Forgive me, my king. Corin stepped aside, revealing Aelith. But there is someone you need to see. Varric turned. For a moment, nothing happened. He stared at her with those amber eyes, searching her face without recognition. She was thinner now, harder, the softness of youth carved away by years of survival. The girl he had loved had become a woman forged in fire. Then his gaze dropped to her hip, to the place where, even through the fabric of her dress, the claiming mark pulsed with sudden, searing heat. No. The word tore from his throat. No. This is not. You cannot be. Varric. She said his name the way she had said it 1,000 times in her dreams. A prayer. A curse. A homecoming. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands cupped her face with a desperation that stole her breath. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, her jaw, and the curve of her lips. He touched her as if she might shatter, as if she might dissolve into mist and leave him alone in his grief once more. Aelith! Her name broke on his tongue. Aelith. 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 You chose her. The accusation escaped before she could stop it. I watched you take her hand and... I remember nothing. His forehead pressed against hers, his breath ragged. I woke 3 days later and you were gone and I thought I had driven you away somehow. You sent no word, no message, no explanation. Because I had none to give. The bond was screaming in my chest and I could not find you, and every day that passed was another knife in my heart. His voice cracked. I have not stopped searching. 5 years, Aelith. 5 years of hunting for a ghost. But his hands were shaking. The Alpha King of Valanthos, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, was trembling before her like a frightened child. They drugged you, she said quietly. Corin told me. Black moonsbane in your wine. I know, but knowing changed nothing. You were still gone. Our bond was still incomplete. Varric. Aelith pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. The prince. Emrys. He is not Ravenna's son. The king went utterly still. He is mine. Ours. I gave birth to him in exile, 3 months after I fled. The Drevos family stole him from my arms when he was an infant. A sound escaped him, something between a sob and a roar, and he pulled her against his chest so tightly she thought her ribs might crack. Our son, that beautiful, stubborn, brilliant boy, he is ours. He is dying. Moonblight fever. The palace healers cannot cure it, but I can. There is a remedy that requires a parent's blood, freely given. Varric pulled back, his eyes blazing with sudden ferocious hope. Tell me what you need. Moon petals, gathered at midnight, they grow in the old grove beyond the city walls. The moon rises full tonight. Varric was already moving toward the door. Corin, prepare horses. We ride immediately. My king, if you leave the palace now, the Drevos family will know something has changed. Let them watch. Varric's voice had transformed. The broken man of moments ago was gone, replaced by the Alpha King in full fury. Let them see me ride out with their precious prisoner at my side. Let them understand that their schemes have failed. He turned back to Aelith and extended his hand. Come with me. Let us save our son together. She took his hand, and for the first time in 5 years, the mark on her hip did not burn with pain. It burned with something far more dangerous. Hope. The grove of moon petals lay an hour's ride beyond the city walls. Aelith clung to Varric's waist as his warhorse thundered through the winter night, Koran and 6 trusted guards flanking them. The cold bit at her exposed skin, but she barely felt it. Every fiber of her being was focused on the task ahead. Emrys, her little wolf. She would reach him in time. She had to. "The grove is sacred ground," Varric called over the wind. "The old wolves planted it 1,000 years ago, when moonblight fever first appeared among our kind. They knew the cure, but the knowledge was lost when their bloodline died out. My grandmother's bloodline descends from theirs. The knowledge was never lost, only hidden." Varric pulled the horse to a sudden halt, twisting in the saddle to face her. "I failed you," he said hoarsely. "I failed you, and I failed our son, and I will spend the rest of my life atoning for that. But I am asking you now, Aelith, give me the chance to make it right." His eyes were the same amber she saw in her dreams, the same amber that looked back at her from their son's face. "Save Emrys," she whispered. "Save him. And we will speak of atonement after." Varric pressed his lips to her forehead. "Then let us not waste another moment." The grove was ancient. Silver-white trees rose toward the moon like supplicants in prayer, their branches heavy with luminescent blooms that glowed against the darkness. The moon petals shimmered with inner light, each one perfect and untouched by the winter that gripped the world beyond. Aelith dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. The magic of the place hummed against her skin, old and powerful and achingly familiar. Her grandmother had brought her here once, when she was very young, had shown her the petals and taught her the words, and made her swear to remember. "One day," the old woman had said, "this knowledge will save someone you love." She knelt beneath the largest tree and began to gather the petals. They were warm in her hands, pulsing with a life that defied the season. Varric knelt beside her. "What do I do?" "Give me your hand." He extended it without hesitation. Aelith drew the small knife she had taken from Corin's belt and pressed the blade to Varric's palm. "Blood of the father," she murmured, "freely given." She cut. He did not flinch. Dark blood welled from the wound, dripping onto the petals cupped in her other hand. Where the blood touched, the petals glowed brighter, their light shifting from silver to gold. Aelith made a matching cut on her own palm. "Blood of the mother, freely given." Her blood joined his, mingling on the luminescent petals. The golden glow intensified, spreading up her arms, filling the grove with light. "It is done." Aelith rose on shaking legs. "We need to return, now." A howl split the night, not the howl of a hunting wolf, the howl of a warning. Corin burst into the grove. "My king, riders from the city, a full company, bearing Dravos colors, they are coming for her." Varric's expression transformed. The tender man who had knelt beside her vanished, replaced by the predator who had united the warring packs of Volanthos through blood and fire. "How many?" 40 at least. Maybe more. "Then we run. The cure is all that matters." "Varric." The voice came from the edge of the grove. Lord Kirin Dravo stepped from the shadows, a crossbow in his hands and a smile on his lips. "I must say I am impressed. When my spies told me you had fled the palace with a corpse, I assumed madness had finally claimed you." He gestured at the glowing grove. "This is far more interesting. Stand aside, Kirin, this does not concern you. I cannot allow that cure to reach the prince. His death serves too many purposes. He is your grandson. He is a complication." Kirin's crossbow rose, aimed directly at Aelith's heart. "As is his mother." The bolt flew. Varric moved faster than Aelith's eyes could follow. One moment he stood beside her. The next, he was between her and the crossbow bolt, his hand closing around the shaft inches from his chest. He snapped it like kindling and let the pieces fall to the frozen ground. "You dare," Varric breathed, and his voice no longer sounded human. The shift began before Kirin could reload. Aelith had seen wolves transform before, but she had never seen anything like this. Varric did not simply shift, he exploded. His wolf was massive, larger than any she had ever seen, with fur the color of midnight, and eyes that blazed like molten gold. Power radiated from him in waves, pressing against her skin, making her own wolf stir in her chest with answering need. The Dravos soldiers stumbled backward. Some dropped their weapons. Others simply ran. But Kieran held his ground. "Kill them both!" the Lord screamed. "Kill them, and the throne is ours." What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Varric tore through the first wave like a scythe through wheat. Bodies flew, blood painted the silver trees, and through it all, his golden eyes never left Aelith, protecting, always protecting. But there were too many. For every soldier Varric cut down, 2 more emerged from the forest. Coran and the guards fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered 5 to 1, and Kieran was circling toward her, a silver blade now gleaming in his hand. "Wolfsbane steel," he called out pleasantly. "Even your precious king will die if this touches his heart." Aelith backed away, her heel catching on a root. She stumbled just as Kieran lunged. The blade sliced across her arm. Fire erupted along the wound. The wolfsbane burned through her veins like acid, spreading faster than any natural poison. She screamed, her legs buckling. Through dimming vision, she saw Varric's wolf spin toward her cry. Saw him begin to race toward her. Too slow. He was too slow. Kieran raised the blade for the killing stroke, and something inside Aelith snapped. The power had always been there, hidden, suppressed. Her grandmother had called it the old gift, the blessing of the first wolves, passed through bloodlines that most believed extinct. Now, with death descending and her son waiting and everything she loved hanging in the balance, that power surged to the surface. Golden light exploded from her body. Kieran was thrown backward, the wolfsbane blade spinning from his grip. The soldiers nearest to her crumpled unconscious before they hit the ground. The light spread outward in a wave, and where it touched, the wolfsbane burning in her veins turned to ash. Aelith rose to her feet, her entire body glowing like a star fallen to earth. "What are you?" Kieran gasped. Aelith looked down at him, and her eyes blazed gold. "I am his mother," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that shook the ancient trees. "And you will never touch my family again." She raised her hand. The light surged toward Kieran, wrapping around him, lifting him from the ground. "Mercy!" he shrieked. "Mercy, I beg you!" "Did you show mercy when you stole my child? Did you show mercy when you left me bleeding in the snow?" "Aelith." Varric's voice cut through her rage. He had shifted back to human form, approaching her slowly, carefully. "He needs to pay," she whispered. "He will. I swear it. But not like this. Not at the cost of your soul. My soul died the night they took Emrys." "No." Varric cupped her face with his other hand. "Your soul brought you back to us. Your soul carries the cure that will save our son. Do not let him take that from you too." The light wavered. Aelith thought of Emrys, of his small hands clutching her wrists, of the tears streaming down his face as he asked why she had left him. She would not become a monster in his name. The golden radiance receded. Kieran dropped to the ground, gasping, alive, but broken. Aelith collapsed against Varric's chest. "The petals," she gasped. "I still have them. We need to go. Emrys." "I know." Varric scooped her into his arms. "Coran, the fastest horse." They reached the city as dawn broke over the mountains. The palace gates flew open at the king's command. Servants scattered. Guards saluted. And through it all, Varric ran with Aelith in his arms, racing toward the east wing where their son lay dying. The door to the prince's chamber burst inward. Ravenna stood beside the bed. Behind her, a man in healer's robes held a vial of dark liquid, the same color as the poison that had nearly killed Aelith in the dungeon. "Step away from my son," Varric commanded. "Your son." Ravenna laughed high and brittle. "He is my son. I birthed him." "You stole him." Aelith slid from Varric's arms, swaying but standing. You stole him from me, and you have been slowly poisoning him ever since, because you knew the truth would emerge. Ravenna's face drained of color. Seize her, Varric ordered. And the healer. They will face trial for treason and attempted murder. Ravenna screamed as guards grabbed her arms. You cannot do this. I am the queen. You are nothing. Varric approached the bed. Emrys lay so still he might have been carved from wax. His skin had turned gray, his breathing shallow. Aelith knelt beside her son. Little wolf, she whispered. Mama is here. Mama is going to make it all better. She pressed the blood-soaked moon petals to his chest. The golden light that had nearly destroyed Kiran now flowed from the petals into Emrys's body, gentle as a mother's touch. It spread through him, seeking out the poison, burning away the infection, rebuilding what had been damaged. Aelith felt the magic draining the last of her strength. Felt herself fading as her son grew stronger, but warm hands covered hers, adding their power to the cure. Varric knelt beside her, his blood mingling with hers on the glowing petals. The magic recognized him, drew from his strength as well as hers. Together, they poured everything they had into their son. The gray faded from Emrys's skin. Color returned to his cheeks. His breathing deepened, steadied, became the peaceful rhythm of healing sleep. And when his eyes finally fluttered open, they were clear amber, unclouded by fever. Mama, he whispered. Papa? Aelith sobbed. Varric pulled them both into his arms, and in the golden light of dawn, a family that had been broken for 5 years was finally whole. The trials lasted 3 days. Lord Kirindravos was executed at dawn on the first morning, his crimes too numerous and too grievous for anything less than death. Ravenna's fate was decided on the second day. The council, presented with evidence of her complicity in the poisoning of the prince and the theft of the true heir, voted unanimously for exile. She was stripped of her title, her wealth, and her wolf, then cast out into the frozen northern wastes to survive or perish, as fate decreed. Aelith watched her former rival dragged from the great hall, and felt nothing. She was simply gone. And Aelith was finally, irrevocably free. The bonding ceremony took place beneath the full moon. The sacred grove where they had gathered the moon petals now served a different purpose. The ancient trees formed a natural cathedral around the clearing where Aelith and Varric stood facing each other. Emrys watched from Kiran's arms, his amber eyes bright with wonder. 5 years ago, Varric said, I gave you a claiming mark in secret. I promised you a throne. I swore you were my mate, my heart, my home. I failed to keep those promises, not by choice, but I failed nonetheless. He raised their joined hands to his lips. Tonight, I make those promises again, not in secret, not in shadows. Before the moon and the old gods and every wolf who calls Volanthos home, I choose you. I will always choose you. Tears slipped down Aelith's cheeks. I spent 5 years believing you had thrown me away. 5 years of grief and rage and desperate hope that refused to die. I told myself I hated you. I told myself I had moved on. A broken laugh escaped her. I was lying. Every night I dreamed of you. Every morning I woke reaching for a warmth that was not there. She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her touch. You are my mate. You have always been my mate. No poison, no distance, no years of separation could change that. The bond knew, even when we had forgotten how to believe. Varric's forehead touched hers. Then let us complete what should never have been broken. He tilted his head, baring the unmarked side of his throat. Aelith understood. The claiming had always been one-sided, but a true mate bond required reciprocity. She pressed her lips to the pulse point beneath his jaw. Then she bit down. The bond exploded between them like a star being born. Aelith gasped as Varric's essence poured into her. Every memory, every emotion, and every moment of the 5 years they had spent apart. She felt his anguish when he woke to find her gone, his fury when he learned of the drugging, his desperation as search after search yielded nothing, and beneath it all, a love so vast it defied comprehension. A love that had never wavered, never dimmed, never stopped reaching for her across the distance that separated them. Through the bond, she knew he was experiencing her memories too. The terror of giving birth alone, the joy of holding Emrys for the first time, the devastating grief when their son was stolen. "I'm sorry," he breathed against her hair. "I'm so sorry for everything you suffered. It brought us here. It brought us back to each other. That is all that matters now." From Corin's arms, Emrys squirmed with impatience. "Is it done? Are we a family now? A real family?" Varric laughed, a sound of pure, unfettered joy that Aelith had never heard from him before. "Yes, little wolf, we are a family, a real family, and nothing will ever separate us again." Emrys beamed and threw his small arms around both their necks. The wolves of Volanthos lifted their voices in a howl of celebration. 1 year later, the nursery in the east wing had been expanded. Aelith stood in the doorway, watching the morning light spill across the room where her children slept. Emrys, now nearly 6 and growing stronger every day, had claimed the bed nearest to the window. He insisted on being able to see the moon when it rose, convinced it would speak to him if he listened closely enough. Perhaps it would. The old power that flowed through Aelith's veins had begun to manifest in their son as well. The healers said he would be the most gifted wolf of his generation. In the cradle beside his bed, twin girls slumbered peacefully. Sarah and Lyra, born 3 months ago, had their father's dark hair and their mother's golden power. Arms wrapped around Aelith from behind. "You should be resting," Varric murmured against her ear. "I could not sleep. I kept thinking about how close we came to losing all of this. But we did not." He pressed a kiss to the mark on her shoulder. His mark, the claiming bite that had started everything. "We found our way back. We always will." Aelith turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the matching mark on his throat. Her mark. Her claim. "I love you," she said. "I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 5 years of grief. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, my mate, my queen, my home." He kissed her as the sun rose over Volanthos, painting the kingdom in shades of gold. In the nursery, Emrys stirred and smiled in his sleep. And somewhere in the sacred grove, the moon petals bloomed out of season, their silver light a blessing on the family that had survived the impossible. They had lost each other once. They would never be lost again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.